Hello and welcome into a Monday night edition of the Arizona State Sun Devils Insider podcast. My name is Kevin Hicks and I'm your lead beat writer for the Arizona State Sun Devils on SI and your host of this daily show. And I'm once again joined by my great co-host Tanner Capolini. And we are here to just do a brief dive into a couple of reports that came out earlier today about the transfer portal for Arizona State as it regards to them. Uh, Tanner, how are you doing this evening? And what are your initial thoughts on some of these reports that have been made?
I'm doing well, Kevin. Even though ASU only has one game left, this season is still pretty much very alive still. It is still busy. Even though it might seem like it's done, it is very much not. And we've had a lot of busy news kind of the past couple of weeks with ASU football, with commits and stuff. And it feels like there's just been a ton of football news. The Phillip Rivers news dropped in the NFL. There's been a ton of stuff going on in the college football playoffs, and it's been crazy. And I opened up Twitter today, and I follow Adrian Boogie Wilson. I saw him kind of tweeting out crying emojis. I'm like, what's going on? And then I saw that Javon Robinson, ASU defensive back, said that he'll be entering the transfer portal. So that was kind of the first thing I saw of that. Then I scrolled down a bit more and saw the Josh Atkin news. And kind of first things first is that, before I kind of dive into this, is that at the end of the day, these players are making the decision that's best for them and their family. And there's probably a lot of factors we don't know about of why they're doing this. So I do want to talk about that. Kind of first and foremost, that I respect the decision. It does sting, especially for Javon Robinson. One of the pieces I did for ASU on SI leading up to the ASU U of A game was Javon Robinson could be kind of the cornerback one next year, especially with Keith Abney most likely going to the draft class for the NFL. But yeah, Robinson is going to leave. And then Josh Atkins as well, the tackle. That wasn't as shocking, but still was some big news to see on social media today.
Yeah, and like you said, there's a lot of factors that go into the decision to enter the transfer portal. And just because you enter the transfer portal doesn't mean you're necessarily departing. It just means you're looking at options. And you really, Coach Dillingham made it a point to say that it's wrong to blame the players for making these decisions when it's the adults in the room that set up these situations to be potentially had. I think that we all know that the transfer portal and NIL and all these things are necessary in today's landscape. But just the lack of regulation, the lack of clarity, and pretty much everything that's being carried out by the NCAA puts these players in bad positions, in positions where they have to make decisions that might end up hurting them and the fan base. And I think that has to be accounted for as well. And I agree with you. I'm not too surprised about Josh Atkins entering the transfer portal. I think that when they picked up Jermaine Marshall from the transfer portal, I mean not from JUCO, he flipped from Georgia to ASU. I believe that he is the natural option, the top option to slot in as the starting left tackle next season. So I think that probably pushed Atkins on his way out in a proverbial sense. As for Javen Robinson, I am pretty surprised by it. I don't know if he's going to return or not. We'll see what happens there. But Arizona State does have some very, very strong young cornerbacks that the program is very high on. Rodney Bimich Jr. and Joseph Smith, especially Bimich, he showed a lot over the last 2 years. He redshirted his freshman year, but he had a couple of moments in the games that he did play. And then this year he really came into his own, especially early in the season. He unfortunately had that injury that knocked him out for the rest of the regular season against West Virginia. But I think in this saga, I think that in the world of instant reaction and instant gratification, that fans tend to get lost in the fray of things. And I really think that fans aren't accounting. This isn't. I mean, if I was looking at this from a fan perspective, I would probably be thinking this too. But if I was a fan, I would. I mean, okay, I need to put my thoughts together real quick. Sorry, Tanner.
I can say something while you
Fans don't realize that Arizona State is going to bring in probably around 20 players in the transfer portal. So the guys that are entering their name in the portal or are intending to do so right now for the January 2nd window, for every one that enters the portal, you're probably going to find somebody, a quality player, to replace them. So it's really an endless cycle, and fans really need to be patient, I think, because if you listen to Coach Dillingham earlier, he was talking about how he feels really, really good about bringing in a quality quarterback, regardless of Sam Levitt's decision. So I think that really that mindset is vital right now, because I think too many Arizona State fans are kind of taking the sky is falling approach, when in reality it's just players making decisions, business decisions. And I think Arizona State's really in the same place as a program that they were before. And I don't think two players change that.
Yeah, I think a couple things to build off. More from the Robinson side. I think kind of the bummer with him is that it's a continuity thing if he were to transfer, because he was number 2 this year to Keith Abney. So it's kind of like, okay, Abney transitions out, and then you have Robinson could be the one, and then some of the other kind of young corners you said could step in and be, maybe 2 or 3, but the other thing too is that Coach Dillingham is pretty kind of aware. He seems like one of those coaches who is a realistic person with the way he views stuff. So I think he kind of knew that this was going to happen. That there's going to be some players who do leave the program, who do leave the team. I remember saying the last time we did a podcast episode that this ASU team was going to look really different, and I said that they might go with more of a new look team than we kind of expect them to, and I think that's what kind of could be going on. And for the kind of Josh Atkins side of it, I do want to touch on a bit, because he was one of those players I followed a lot in this offseason. He was one of those guys that just kind of before the season began was fun to research, because he had a really good 2024 season. He had a really solid campaign. He was really good in 2024, and I'm like, okay, this guy could maybe be kind of a first or second round NFL draft prospect, and I felt like he was one of the guys that was really going to be a staple as a Sun Devil on the O-line, and he was a bit more up and down this year, so I could see from his point of view of that he wants, because he has a lot of traits, he's big, he can move well, if he wants to go to more of an established offensive line school, I could totally see that. That wouldn't shock me if he would have transferred somewhere. So that makes more sense with Josh Atkins, because I feel like that with him it was like, okay, this season may didn't go as planned to see where he goes. But yeah, I like how you mentioned about, ASU is probably going to bring in a lot of players with the transfer portal as well. This is going to be a very new-look team next year.
Yeah, and great points, Tanner. And beyond the transfer portal, there's the looming decisions of draft-eligible players as well. And there's whispers that Raleek Brown might potentially opt to enter the NFL draft after his stock has risen pretty greatly over the last few weeks. So you're possibly looking at running back as well. Just off the top of my head, in terms of transfer portal positions that you're going to really be stressing, you're obviously going to bring in a quarterback, maybe 2 quarterbacks, no matter what Sam Levitt does. You're probably going to bring in a running back. I think Man Robinson and Jason Brown Jr. probably deserve a little bit of run going into the 2026 season, but Kyson Brown as the lead back, assuming Raleek goes pro, he's obviously capable, but you obviously need depth at the running back position anyway, so probably a good idea to bring in somebody there. Then tight end, you might need to bring in a tight end. I really like AJ Ia. I think that he is going to be a breakout next season. I like Kamari Anderson fine as a blocker specifically. I like the 2 freshmen that they brought in Landon Myrie and um, Hayden Versher. Um, you might want to bring in a guy there anyways. Offensive line and defensive line are really the two big positions that they need to address in the transfer portal. They really need to bulk up the trenches. They're losing a lot of players at those positions. And beyond those two, kicker and punter. You need beefed up special teams. Jesus Gomez is out of eligibility. You might need to bring in a punter to compete with Canyon Floyd. There's a lot of positions that need to be addressed. That's really the moral of this story. But I have all the faith in the world that the Arizona State coaching staff and Coach Dillingham will be able to properly identify the players that are not only strong talents that have proven track records, but also guys that are great cultural fits. That's just as important, and I think that's really what fans need to hone in on.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack what you said in a good way. I think one thing that's going to be really interesting to kind of see is how many players choose to come to ASU to the Kenny Dillingham culture. That is something we have talked about a lot. So it's going to be interesting to see, okay, how do players respond? How do they react? And it felt like a lot of the transfers from last year, because I've been writing some pieces about kind of the last year, it was a lot of players from schools who were kind of maybe in the middle to low tier, maybe some big name schools that weren't performing as well. I'm interested to see how this kind of year goes with the transfer portal. Yeah, the quarterback thing as well is also really big. Sam Levitt of it all is still kind of up for discussion. There's a news story about him recently with a team event that I don't really want to dive into because I don't know the full story. At the end of the day, you know, if Levitt goes, I'll miss him a lot. I love watching him play, but I could also see why he could maybe want to transfer out, as it seems like Jordan Tyson is more so going to the NFL draft. And then kind of, yeah, the draft stuff as well you mentioned. I definitely think Keith Abney declares. He hasn't yet, but I think he does. Because the cornerback class, and I'll probably dive into this in a future piece, it's very open for Abney to, I think, be a top 2 to 3 pick. And then I like the Malik Brown of it as well, because Jeremiah Love, the Notre Dame back, is kind of the consistent number 1. I think he's a top 10 player in this draft class, but this is a very, very thin running back class, depth-wise, kind of as opposed to last season, if you will, when the NFL draft had a lot more names in it. So, yeah, that would be very interesting because I thought Raleek, he really ended things strongly, especially the Colorado game. So it'll be interesting to see what kind of he does and stuff and kind of where that goes. And I know, Kevin, you've mentioned as well, and this is kind of like a semi-question to you of, I know you said Dillingham has kind of some pipeline connections in kind of the South with his time at some of the colleges there. Do you think that's going to be a big play in a transfer portal? Because it wasn't really last year, but do you think that could be more of a thing this year?
Yeah, I do think so. I'm not 100% sure where it's going to come from, but I do believe that the recruiting patterns that they had in the 2025 class really show that the coaching staff is prepared to go anywhere and everywhere to find those culture fits, to find those talents that really tantalize the program, intrigue them. They have commits from Texas, California, Ohio, uh, really all over the country, Georgia, Florida. They're really scouring the nation. And I think that Arizona State is an underrated national brand. I think that a lot of players are very, very intrigued in coming to Tempe and playing for this coaching staff, not just their position coach, because I think pretty much all the position coaches have done a great job, but also to learn from the other position coaches outside of their own position. There's a lot of things to like about Tempe and the Arizona State program as a whole, and I do think that Dillingham's going to utilize his connections to land some players.
Yeah, I think another thing too, it's going to be interesting to see is kind of what happens as well if these coordinators, Brian Ward and Marcus Arroyo, if they were to get hired elsewhere. A lot of the coaching hiring is happening now. You had the whole Lane Kiffin to LSU thing break last week, and then you had Matt Campbell to Penn State. That's huge, by the way. That kind of really affects ASU with Iowa State, the Cyclones being in the Big 12. I did not see that coming. Happy for Matt Campbell, though, because he seems like a great dude. But yeah, if I had to guess, I think Ward and Arroyo would stay. We can talk about that a bit more in detail later. But I think if it would have happened by now, it would have occurred. But yeah, that's another thing too with the coaches you have here. You have guys like Hines Ward and stuff. You have a lot of kind of big names, and I think that could be a big thing from recruiting as well. The different elements that ASU can have with the transfer portal and recruiting, and say, hey, we have guys who are in NFL. Then you kind of have the high school side with Sean Aguano, and then you have the college aspect as well with Marcus Arroyo at Oregon. So I don't know. I like that a lot. I think ASU set up really well. And I'm interested to see kind of what positions, because if you look at kind of ASU last year, a lot of their transfers they had were a lot of people in kind of the, I guess, passing area. Like defensively, they did not have any transfers on the D line coming in. It was all guys in the secondary. Offensively, you had two linemen, but it was a lot more pass catchers. So I'm really interested to see if this is more of a trench play for this transfer class for ASU.
Yeah, I do think so. This is going to kind of be my last thoughts. I think you and I and everyone watching all know that football games are won in the trenches, and I think that while Arizona State had a very good front seven this season, they know that pretty much everybody's gone. Even CJ Fight might be gone, and they really need to beef up that defensive line. They have some players that are already in-house, such as an Albert Smith off the edge, such as a Martell Hughes, such as a Zach Swanson, who's hopefully going to return from an injury. But you can never have enough guys at those positions, and the offensive line had more issues than you would have liked this season, and you really want to build up an offensive line that looked like the one that you saw against Texas in the college football playoff about a year ago. That was an offensive line that was pushing around Texas for most of that second half after they got off to a rough start. That's what you want, and I think that they are well positioned to build up both sides of the trenches. And I have faith in Dillingham, Coach Dillingham. My faith has never really wavered. So,
Yeah, and then to kind of wrap it up, I think that overall, I think a lot of this is just almost a mindset thing for the fans, and I can understand it can be tough when players you like watching leave. I remember when Shimon Matera declared for the NFL draft. It's something that makes you sad because you like watching the players, but you're also happy for them that they're going on. And I think that college is almost that stepping stone, is that in between high school and the NFL. Eventually, in college, these players are going to leave due to the years. It's not like they can be at a college for 10 years or so. There's years of eligibility. That's how it works. And I think that this is just going to be a very different looking team next year, but it's not a bad thing. I think sometimes new with sports can be bad. I think it can be a good thing. I think ASU, they had a good 2-year run with a good core. They got a lot of great wins, and it's going to be exciting to see what happens next in Sun Devil Nation.
yep, Tanner. I think you wrapped things up beautifully there. Lots of reason to be optimistic despite the potential roadblocks that we're seeing right now. A season-ending game against the Duke Blue Devils just about 3 weeks away. Lots to look forward to regardless of the result of the season. Whether it was something that you wanted, that you envisioned, that you were accepting or not. The future's still bright, like you said. And I think that fans should take solace in the fact that Kenny Dillingham is choosing to stay around for the long haul. And that's all I have for today. Thank you so much for tuning in to another edition of the Sun Devils Insider Podcast. And Tanner, thank you so much for joining me once again. We will talk about this more in detail once we get a bigger grasp of the number of players that are entering the portal. And yeah, that's really all I have. And we will see you with another show talking about this in the near future. Stay tuned for that.